Hello, world, and welcome to another exciting episode of A Little Bit Different Podcast with your host, Corey Sterling. What's up? I hope this finds your earbuds comfortably, nicely. I'm not sure where you are in the world, but wherever you are, I hope that you're having fun and enjoying this. I'm really excited to share this week's episode, which is about adventures in climbing. So, don't know if you know this about me, now you will. I've had some really amazing adventures climbing mountains all over the world. And today I'm going to reflect on three specific hikes that I've done. One was in Nepal going to Everest Base Camp. One was in Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And one was in Aconcagua in Argentina. So like most things in my life, I'm very much an amateur, very much a beginner and just an enthusiast about doing things. I never really had the intention of doing anything very serious with my climbing, but I always just wanted to do it, and it sort of just happened randomly the first time, and then it was something that I had pursued for a couple of years. And so in this episode today, I want to walk you through these three different hikes that I've done and what I learned about life through climbing mountains, which has actually been really profound and insightful and helpful. And even as I was preparing for this show, I was reading through old emails that I'd shared with friends, and I realized like there's a lot of nuggets, like some really good information and reflections. And I was like, oh, who thought of this? Oh yeah, that was me. Sweet one. I'm really excited to share. And the intention of this episode is just to take you on adventures with me to Africa, to Asia, to South America, and share a little bit about what I learned about life through hiking mountains. So here we go. The beginning of my climbing adventures took place in Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And you just have to understand that when I travel, I'm spontaneous and I don't really plan anything whatsoever. And I was on a speaking tour and a volunteering trip in Kenya to help out Africa Yoga Project. I was talking about yoga law to some of their teacher trainers, and I would visit different communities in Kenya. I was staying with Paige, who's a friend of mine, and she's the founder of Africa Yoga Project. And as I was meeting all of these different people, everyone's like, so what have you got planned for Africa? What have you got planned when you're in Kenya and in this region? And I was like, I don't have anything planned. What am I supposed to do? Why don't you tell me what I'm supposed to do? Why don't you tell me? And a lot of people were like, oh, well, you can hike Kilimanjaro. And I was like, what's Kilimanjaro, right? And I found out that it's one of the 7 summits. Highest points of each continent are called the 7 summits, and they're on different mountains. And in Africa, the mountain is Mount Kilimanjaro. So I was like, cool, awesome, let's do it. I'm down. I was living in British Columbia, Canada at the time. I figured, oh, hey, like I know how to climb. I can do this. And I went to, obviously I'm with my backpack and my sandals and 2 pairs of shorts and 1 long sleeve shirt. And I go to a market in Nairobi, which was a trip. And I bought used boots to try to do the hike with. And I bought a sweatshirt. And yeah, that's all I really had with me. I found my way through Paige and her connections. I was able to connect with a tour operator, and then I was on my way. And it was it was such a special experience going to Kilimanjaro, I think for a couple of reasons. One was not only my tour guide, Jonas, who I'll talk about in a moment, but just all of the porters who help. It's sort of like when you're coming up to Kili, there's a parking lot filled with hundreds of workers, and all they're trying to do is get picked as porters to come on the trip as well. So I was like, wow. And I think it was me and Jonas, and I think we had like 5 porters, which was insane. And it was really cool. And to be honest, when I think about all of it, my favorite part of the trip was hanging out with the porters at night. You sing songs, and they were really lovely guys. But as this was my first experience climbing mountains, I really didn't know what to expect. And there were a couple of really, really big lessons that I took from Kilimanjaro. The first are the Swahili words pole pole, which means slowly, slowly. So when they teach you, I think Kilimanjaro is 5,300 meters above sea level. And they teach you that as you go higher, you have to walk slower. And this is sort of counterintuitive to everything that we do in our lives, because usually we think that if we want to do something and get it done properly, that we should do it as quickly as possible. But pole pole is the theme of Kilimanjaro. It's just like slowly, slowly, one step at a time, and you go for it slowly. Another thing that I learned very, very quickly about climbing mountains and mountaineering, I guess maybe would be the word, is that it is a completely different fitness level than all other sports. So the big challenges and dangers with climbing is that you continue to, the higher you go, the less oxygen there is in the air to breathe. So the more difficult it is to move. And this obviously can be very, very dangerous. So for me, being an amateur athlete and teaching spin classes, which totally qualifies me to climb Kilimanjaro, this is a joke. I heard a couple of stories my first couple nights in Kilimanjaro, which were very, very scary. And that was that there were 2 Irish rugby players who were there the week before who died on the mountain, even though they were like professional rugby players. But they had really, really big muscles and they were super fit guys. But on the mountain, that actually doesn't really mean anything. On the mountain, what matters is your ability to go slowly, have good luck, have good weather, not get altitude sickness, and ideally go slowly as possible so that your body can adjust to getting higher with less oxygen. And yeah, it was just crazy for me to learn that 2 professional rugby players had died. And you know, when you're going up Kili, I think we camped 2 or 3 nights before summiting, and I just met all of these people who had done Aconcagua, who had climbed Everest, who had climbed, I think it's Mount McKinley in Alaska, I think it's Mount Cook in New Zealand or Australia. So like a lot of people who've done other the 7 summits, and they're like potbellies, old, slow, but mentally, it's like really climbing is all about your mental strength and the ability to keep going. So it was interesting to learn that like you actually go faster by going slowly. And it was also interesting to learn that when you climb, it's different physical fitness needs than we think. And actually, the more muscles that you have, the more difficult it is for you because the more oxygen your body needs in order to circulate everything. In terms of climbing and following with a guide, was the reality and the fact that... Hello world, this is Corey from A Little Bit Different Podcast. I'm going to tell you a statistic now, you're not going to believe it. Only 22% of people who listen to the Little Bit Different Podcast actually subscribe or like the channel. So right now I'm on a mission to get 250 subscribers to the channel by the end of the year. Will you help me? I'm hoping that the answer is yes. So please, anytime you watch any of our content, subscribe, hit subscribe, that whole button there, and like it and share it and keep being different and having the most fun ever. I had to listen to someone who I didn't like, and I had to sort of take orders and follow him. And his name was Jonas. On the first day, he said to me, okay, Corey, do you want to summit Kilimanjaro? And I was like, yes, I want to do it. I want to do it. And he's like, Corey, if you want to summit Kilimanjaro, you have to listen to everything that I say. And at first I was like, okay, cool. I can do this, Jonas. I can do this. And then it just really fucking pissed me off. And then he just really annoyed me. And it would just be like 8 o'clock. Everyone else from all the other groups would be hanging out and socializing. He's like, Corey, it's time for you to go to sleep. I don't know. That's my Jonas voice. But he would just like always, he was such a disciplinarian. He was so tough on me. And it was tough love. And I really didn't like him. I really, really did not like him. And what I learned is that I don't like people telling me what to do. I think part of why I run my own business and I live such a freedom-driven lifestyle is that I like to decide what I do and how I do it and when I want to do it. But ultimately, he would always just be hanging that carrot over my head where I'd be like, no, like, I want to chill and talk to these people. And he's like, Corey, if you want to summit, you have to listen to me. good reminder that sometimes we need to listen to other people in order to get what it is that we want to get. And ultimately, I was successful in summiting Kilimanjaro. Summit day was very, very memorable. At that time, it was the most difficult, probably one of the most difficult things that I had done. They wake you up at like 2 a.m. because they have to make sure that you can get all the way up and then come down while it's still light. So you wake up, it's really, really cold. I think I borrowed like the porter's gloves and hat. You'll see the photos that are associated with the episode. I wasn't making any fashion statements, but I ended up making it to the top. And I remember within like the first 2 hours on summit day, I vomited everywhere. I was bawling my eyes out and I had to poo on the side of the mountain. And that was my Kilimanjaro Triple Crown. Like I just was in a state. But I ended up making it. I went very, very slowly at the end. It was actually the last 100 meters, 200 meters were quite difficult for me. But I was really, really grateful to make it. I made it to the top. And then it's really cool when you're going down. It's like every 100 meters, you just feel better and better and better. But I did see absolutely something insane and crazy. There was an Italian guy who had altitude sickness. So altitude sickness is when there's not enough oxygen that's being pumped through your body to your brain. And so your body doesn't function properly. You don't have the same reaction times. And you're definitely not yourself. And I saw some of the craziest things I've ever seen was this Italian guy. He lived in the Alps in Italy. He was a climber. He had done this his whole life. But unfortunately, he got very sick. He had to turn around before he summited. And he was like flying down the mountain, just flying, just couldn't even control his body. And there were 2 times where like he came so close to running full speed into a rock. It was terrifying. And even when I was at the base camp for Kilimanjaro, I remember they had to send in a helicopter and they had to rescue someone, which is just like, the conditions are so rough. It's not fun when you see that. But the big thing I took from the Italian guy was like, okay, it doesn't matter how fit you are, how experienced you are, you can really, really get in a lot of trouble on mountains. I successfully summited Kilimanjaro. I felt lucky. I felt very, very happy to have done it. And then I was like, oh, I got one of the 7 summits. Why don't I just keep going for more? Like this is sort of easy. Which obviously it's not, as you're about to find out. So having whetted my appetite with Kilimanjaro, I wanted to go to Everest Base Camp. And Everest Base Camp was, wow, it was, I think of the 3 hikes that I've done between Kili and Everest Base Camp in Aconcagua, Everest Base Camp was the most fun that I had. It was the most enjoyable one. It was the one where I had the best relationship with my guide and with my group. And it's interesting because you basically, for Everest Base Camp, you go up to, I think it's 5,800 meters, and you just go to the base camp where all of the people who summit Everest then start. And there's like 4 camps from Everest Base Camp to the summit of Everest. So it's not overly dangerous. In Nepal, there was a really, really bad earthquake I think maybe 2018, 2017, and a lot of people died, unfortunately. So it's dangerous for that. It's less dangerous, I think, than the other ones, but obviously it's much higher than Kilimanjaro. And what in line with, firstly, Nepal was amazing. I love Nepal. I haven't been back, but on my list of countries to revisit, Nepal is in the top 3. Myanmar is also on there as well. And with Everest Base Camp, I learned a couple really, really important lessons. And I think the first one was that sometimes it can take a really long time to achieve your goals. So Kilimanjaro was much more wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, in the sense that it was 3 days, I was there, and actually the same day that I summited, I exited the park. I was like, I'm done. I'm just going to keep walking until the end. And so you don't really have that prolonged time of what it's like to be climbing and to be sleeping many, many nights at very, very high altitude. It's like Kilimanjaro, you just like sort of shoot up, come down, hope everything goes okay, and it does. But in Everest Base Camp, I really, really learned that even though pole pole is the theme of Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp really taught me the power of consistent effort and the need to be satisfied with going slowly, and that going slowly is cool. And humility is always one of the biggest lessons that I learned when climbing mountains. I think there's humility with nature and realizing that you are in no control whatsoever for what's actually going on, and that the weather can turn and I've been part of it, weather can turn in 1 second. You can be caught in a storm, and then things can get very, very dangerous very, very quickly. So I think one is humility and respect for weather and nature is a really great lesson that I learned in Everest Base Camp. I think secondly, also humility of going slowly and always being the last one in the group. That was my rule. What I took from Kilimanjaro and from Jonas, however much I didn't like the guy, pole pole was a big part of it. And I made a promise to myself, like, Corey, on Everest Base Camp, you will be the last one. I will be at the bottom of the last person in the line the entire hike, just to force myself to make sure that I go slowly. And it was such an amazing lesson, just even the simplicity of that. Also, you learn a lot about humility when you see other people getting ill. Because I was at the back, I wouldn't go in front of anyone. So oftentimes if someone wasn't feeling well, I would be walking with them, and just like learning that compassion of how to try to make people smile or make them feel better, or just sit with them being in pain as it's going on, was something really profound, and it taught me a lot. The big thing that I took from Everest Base Camp also was the whole idea and process of acclimatization and what it means to acclimate when climbing. So essentially, in order for your body to get used to the altitude that you're at and to be comfortable and to operate regularly, you need to go up to a certain altitude, and then you need to come down. Instead of just like, cool, like we're just going up and we're not looking back. So the Everest Base Camp, I think, was 17 days. And when you do it, some of those days, you're just like, you would just have a rest day where you'd get to 4,500 meters or 5,000 meters. You'd stay there for a day. You'd go for a little walk. And then the next day you'd go up 400 meters and then you'd come back down. And I just love this because you're not going anywhere. You're not making any improvements to your goal. Superficially, you can't see any improvements or gains being made. But what's actually happening is you're increasing your capacity and ability to achieve a future goal while staying in the same place. And I've learned this lesson is so valuable in entrepreneurialism as well, in building a business and building several businesses, that sometimes you go through a period where it just seems like nothing's happening and you're in the exact same place. But so long as you're spending that time productively and improving your systems and improving your automations, you're going to be in a position that when you need to go to that level, you're going to be ready to do it. So acclimating was something that I really learned in Everest Base Camp, which was super helpful to me. I fell in love with my guide. His name was Raj. He's a really, really awesome Nepalese guy. He was training to run a marathon, like along the Everest Base Camp course. He's Nepalese. They have different bloods. The Sherpas there have different bloods. And he just has an amazing capacity. But it was really, really special because I loved Raj, and he was an example of someone that is so different than me, right? Growing up in a small Nepalese village with, 8 brothers and 4 sisters and having nothing. But we both loved nature. We loved being outdoors. And the fondest memories I have from Everest Base Camp, much more so than getting to the base camp or the incredible, amazing scenery or falling asleep under the stars or all of those things, was really my connection with Raj. And yeah, it taught me, again, something that I learned through travel so often, that we're so different and we have such different upbringings, but really we're so similar. And my favorite moment from the Everest Base Camp hike was one of the last nights. There weren't enough beds in the rooms, and I learned that if we went to a lodge and there weren't enough spaces, Raj would sleep on the floor. So I think it was like one of our last nights where there were no beds, and then I just posted up and slept on the floor beside him, and we made a fire, and I was on the floor looking out the window, seeing like the amazing Himalaya mountains with the stars. And he and I were just talking and laughing. And I think we were drinking, they have some alcohol they drink up there. That time I was drinking alcohol. And it just was such a beautiful, wonderful experience. So Everest was the most fun and probably the least difficult and the least challenging. Kili, I had no idea what to expect. So it was my first time sort of dealing with feeling ill on a mountain and lack of oxygen. Everest was cold and uncomfortable, but really the connection with my guide brought me through. And I really came to appreciate what it meant to acclimate when you're climbing, and also just like the importance of humility and going slowly. So Everest was amazing. I want to go do Annapurna. That's on my list of things to do in the near future. And I can only just say the best things about Nepal and the experience. Lastly, wow, Aconcagua. This was really, really an experience for me. This was a beautiful, beautiful life experience. And Aconcagua is in Mendoza in the Andes mountain range. So Kilimanjaro, it's more like, it's just like a big mountain. And it's sort of, I don't really think it's in a mountain range. If I remember looking out, it's sort of like a big bump, and it's not really situated in a significant mountain range. Everest Base Camp is in the Himalayas, which stretches through India and Tibet and Nepal and China. And Aconcagua is located in the Andes mountain range, which runs through South America, all the way up from Colombia to Argentina and Chile. And so Aconcagua is in Argentina. And I went in February 2022. And the Aconcagua was the highest mountain in all of the Americas, between North and South America. Aconcagua was the highest, 6,900 meters. And I at the time, I mean, I sort of trained, but I didn't really train. Again, like, this is the theme that I see going on in my life. I was kite surfing. So whatever connection there is between kite surfing and being able to climb a mountain. I remember I went on a trip 1 week to a nearby town that had a gym with a Stairmaster, and I would just go on the stairs 90 minutes a day. And like, I don't know, living in a small Brazilian beach town, it's difficult to prepare for the mountains and for hiking with a pack. So a couple of things of what I learned in Aconcagua. 6,900 meters, it's a different game. So again, Everest, I think Everest Base Camp is maybe 58. Kilimanjaro is maybe 54. This was 1,500 meters higher. It was one of the most beautiful, amazing experiences of my life. It was very, very difficult. It was very, very, very uncomfortable, but it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. Some of the things that I saw from a perspective of nature were unbelievable in Aconcagua. And yeah, and I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget it. It was the first time since I really started Conscious Counsel that I was able to be offline for 3 weeks. I took 3 weeks off while I was climbing, and I left my laptop at the bottom, and my phone didn't have Wi-Fi. And this was like me being off the grid for 3 weeks for the first time since starting my business, which in and of itself was really, really refreshing. And I can tell you that I came back from it. Anytime I go offline and then I come back, you just realize like there's nothing serious going on here, and nothing's really as important as you think it is, which is always a helpful reminder. Aconcagua, I think it's about, maybe it takes 16 days, 17 days, and you get to base camp maybe at day 12 or 13. So it's 13 days just to get to Aconcagua base camp. And then from there, there's 3 more camps that you go to. And I think you're sleeping at, and the final camp before the summit day is 6,000 meters. And the one before that, I think, is like 58. And then the one before that maybe is like 54, 53. So it's significantly more challenging and difficult than the other ones. And yeah, and as a result, you have to go much, much slower. So again, this whole idea of going very, very slowly and being okay with it, like acclimating. And this time this was my 3rd hike, so I knew a bit about what to expect. But yeah, but it was challenging. It was challenging because at the time it was COVID. So they were really, really strict. This is a crazy story. So they were really, really strict about who you interact with. When I started, it was me and two Belgian girls and my guide Poppy, who I also didn't like. Like sometimes I just don't get along with my guides. And what happened was we were supposed to be joined by a group of 15 people. So we were going to be 18, and it was like me and these two Belgian girls. On the day that we were going to leave, in order to enter the park of Aconcagua, you had to do a COVID test. One of the Belgian girls got a COVID test positive, and so she wasn't able to come. She had to wait. It was like you had to wait 10 days and then you could re-enter. So now, also not only this, but like the whole social aspect of climbing as you go, you're at the base camp, you're talking to people, you make friends. I had gone and they're like, you can't socialize with people other than your group. So it was me and this Belgian girl who like I just really didn't have anything in common with, a complete stranger, and Poppy, the guide. And they wouldn't let us socialize with anyone else, and they wouldn't let us do anything with anyone else. Finally, like we get to maybe like we started 5 days before our group. The group joins us. Like we're having a dinner, and there's like a Mexican guy and a Canadian guy and an Italian girl. And like I'm making all these friends. I'm like, cool, like now the momentum's happening. It's going. And that day they arrived. When anytime you got to a new camp, they would make you do a new COVID test. This is how crazy it was. And someone in their group tested positive. And they said the rule was if anyone in the group tests positive, everyone has to go down. So all these people from like the UK and Australia and wherever flew all the way to Argentina to enter. And they didn't even have COVID, but someone in the group did. So they had to go down and wait 10 days and then try to come back up. It was like, it sucked. It was just like an example of, I mean, COVID sucked in a lot of ways, but that was one way of how COVID sucked. Anyway, so Aconcagua was difficult because I was only able to spend my time with these two people, and I didn't really have anything in common with them. There was an Argentinian guy named El Flaco. Flaco means skinny. And Flaco, like I adopted him into the group. I was like, hey, this guy's with us because I need to be with someone else. And he and I bonded and had a really good time. But and so we went, we were in Aconcagua, and it was an interesting experience, an interesting climb for me. You got to go, it's up to 6,900 meters. So a couple of the lessons that I learned through this process. I got up until the final base camp, I was perfect. Didn't vomit, was never sick, slowly, great conditioning, felt awesome. Summit days when everything fell apart for me, and I'll tell that story in a moment. But one thing that I appreciated about Aconcagua, especially when I came down, was the privilege of choosing who I spend my time with, and the privilege of being an entrepreneur and getting to choose who I work with and choose my clients and choose my team. Because those 3 weeks of having to sit every meal, spend every time, walk every step with people who I didn't like, I didn't have anything in common with, who I didn't really get along with, that was the most difficult part. That was the most difficult part of Aconcagua. And Flaco saved me, and he was amazing. But the first thing is like, you just get off the mountain, you realize like, holy shit, I'm so lucky that I get to choose who I interact with in my life and who I get to spend my time with. One of the most important lessons that I got from it's still very I'm gutted still. I don't think I'll ever get over it. But there's a part on summit day in Aconcagua when you're at 6,600 meters. There's a really steep ramp that you go up, and the whole thing they tell you always is like, when you're at that ramp, like you just don't look up. Do not look up. Whatever you do, do not look up at the ramp. Sort of like, what am I thinking of? Maybe it's Medusa, like you're not supposed to look her in the eyes, or, Siren, where they had to tie the Greek guy to the mast so that he couldn't, right? Whatever you do, don't look up when you're climbing on summit day. To go from 6,600 to 6,900 to get to the summit. Like I said, I was in great shape. I was feeling awesome until summit day. We get to 6,000 meters. We're camping at 6,000 meters. Again, when you summit, you like wake up at 3 a.m. You go with a headlamp and you start climbing up. At this point, that night, I was just stoked. I was like, I can't believe it's happening. I can't believe I'm here. I made it. I'm going to summit Aconcagua. Like, I did it. I'm at the end. I know that it's going to happen. I know that it's going to be amazing. And they like, look, the things that they tell you, you really should listen to. And they're like, whatever you do, really, really try to get some rest. But I swear it was, I don't know, -10. And I'm like trying to sleep in my tent. And I was just too excited. And I was just thinking about like all my friends and everyone who had supported me. And I raised money to send 4 Kenyan girls to high school. Like, there was so much. I was like, oh, I can't wait to make it. And then tell everyone all of this. And I actually didn't sleep 1 second. And so the conditions are very, very difficult because you're spending so much time at 6,000 meters. Plus, I didn't sleep. Summit day comes. We start walking. I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing great. I feel awesome. Other people on the team are a little bit weak. I'm feeling good. I'm going for it. I'm like, this is my day. This is my day. Then just like a ton of bricks just fell on me, just out of nowhere, started vomiting, got really ill. I was at 6,300. Maybe the summit is 66 and I was at 63. I think that's what it is. And I just got really, really, really ill. And I started vomiting everywhere. I couldn't really keep it together. At this point, you have to put clamps on your shoes. We did like a practice day with the clamps, but my clamps weren't working, and I was in bad shape. And then there was a point where I was at 66. I believe the summit's 69. I was at 66 at the ramp, and I looked up, and I was done. And I wanted to keep going. There was a really, really, really scary moment. Also in Aconcagua, 1 of 100 people die. 1 of 100 people who attempt to summit Aconcagua die. There were a couple of people who I knew in the camp who had some really, really close calls that had gone up right before. And I was sick. I was in really bad shape. When you walk with poles. And when I was at the top, there's a very, very steep and like very thin sort of like ice walkway. It is as dangerous with a sheer face on the other side. And I dropped my pole, and Poppy was like, you're done. Poppy sent me home. She's like, you're turning back. I'm getting someone to walk back with you. And I was green, like my whole face was green, and I definitely wasn't myself. And I was very, very sick. And in that, there was like 0.01 second where I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. And then I was like, fuck that. I want to live. And I realized how much I love my life, how much I love living, how I want to have a family in the future, how I want to be there for my niece and my nephew and my parents and my sister and my friends and my business and my client and my community and all the amazing things that I want to do. And it was like, in a second, she's like, you're done. And I was like, okay. And I turned around. And I think when my pole fell off, like my pole fell thousands of feet down, like a sheer drop on a cliff face, I was like, okay, that if I lose my balance, that's going to be me, and this isn't worth it because I'm not a professional and I don't really care that much, and this doesn't define me. So much of Aconcagua was learning the humility and the respect to walk away from something that you really want. And that also like learning that sometimes you have to be proud with your effort, and you don't get what you want and you don't achieve your goal, even though it costs thousands of dollars and lots of time and so much mental energy and such a big effort. Sometimes it just doesn't happen, and it's just not your day. But then you realize that it is your day because you're alive and you get to keep living and you get to keep going. And so it was a whole range of experiences. Aconcagua was a lot for me. I was very, very uncomfortable throughout the entire process. It was beautiful, but it was really, really challenging. I think if socially things had been different, like if I were to go now and COVID wasn't such a thing, and I could make friends, I'm a social being, so if I could be social, if I could chat with more people, I think I really would have enjoyed it a lot more. I don't know if that would have changed me summiting or not, but but when I walked down, I got off that, I was walking down that mountain. You basically go from base camp to the entrance of the park in one day. It's a super long day. I think it's like 40,000 steps, something like that. And the whole time I was like, I'm never fucking coming back to this place. And I haven't climbed a mountain since. And I don't feel called to climb a mountain right now or for the foreseeable future. But it was really beautiful. I had a great run when I did it. And I think this was the time in my life where I got the clearest on listening to my dreams. And I had a dream when I was on Aconcagua after I came down and didn't make it. I had a dream about living in Tel Aviv in the Middle East. And I woke up from that dream and I was like, the first thing I'm doing when I get on my computer is buying a one-way ticket. And that's what I did. And since then, I've really done an excellent job of receiving a download of my dream and following it and going for it. So a whole range of emotions and experiences. And that was Aconcagua.